IT Enabled is a technology consulting firm that works with businesses across the nation to unlock productivity, reduce expenses, and increase the company's bottom line. With more than 75 years combined experience in the technology industry, our ability to manage and maintain your systems is unparalleled. We are resourceful, trustworthy, and experienced to help your business. Learn more about how we can help you with fast and effective 24-hour support at itenabled.com.
Watson-Watkins, President and CEO of the Lufkin Angelina County Chamber of Commerce. Welcome to the Chamber Podcast, Connecting Business to Community. I'm here with my co-host, Blake Pollino of BP Media Group.
So we're back again this week with a special two-part episode where we interviewed two local community leaders, Mayor Trey Wilkerson of the city of Diboll and John Thomas Jones, who is the mayor of Burke. And we're going to learn more about their communities, how they're involved, and how they became leaders in those communities in this episode. So let's jump into that right now.
Well, we're going to start today with the new mayor of Diboll, Mayor Trey Wilkerson. We welcome you to the podcast. For the people listening and our viewers, why don't you give a little background history on yourself?
Okay. Just came on as mayor of Diboll in the last 3 or 4 months now, November election. And so prior to that, I served on the school board in Diboll for about 20 years. And so that's about as good of a introduction, I guess, as you can get, because about 13 of those I was board president. So, serving as a presiding officer, a lot of overlap, obviously, with the city and also in some of the rules and laws and those kinds of things. So it was, I think, hopefully going to be a good preparation. I've been in Diboll all my life and graduated from Diboll. My dad taught school in Diboll for 20 some odd years. And so Diboll means a lot to us, been involved in a lot of the community stuff, kids in school there. So it was kind of a natural thing to see if this was another way we could help out.
That's fantastic. Well, we're glad to have you. Diboll it's such a beautiful area. And I don't think people realize maybe all about your parks. You've got 65 acres of beautiful trees in the old Orchard Park. And in that, and I didn't even realize it until I was really looking it up, you've got baseball fields, picnic, basketball pavilions, volleyball, tennis courts, walking. I knew about the walking and biking trails. You've got a splash pad, a playground, and then in the center of it is a beautiful pond and pier where families can come. Why don't you tell us things that happen at Old Orchard Park?
Oh, yeah. Our parks, and the Old Orchard Park in particular, is definitely a tremendous asset that Diboll has. You listed all the stuff, and we've had several upgrades to some of those things just in the last year. The splash pad in particular, and the baseball fields. We just got new scoreboards that Georgia Pacific donated there. And so it's always been good. Yeah. It's been utilized a lot. We have a lot of people that utilize the walking paths and everything every single day. But we think it's gotten a little bit better in the last little while. Of course, Diboll Day, that's every other year. That culminates down in the park, the awards and the food and all that kind of stuff. And then several other festivals throughout the year that the Diboll Festival Committee has put on. The Tamale Festival has been a big one for a little over 10 years now. That happens down there in the park. July 4th, another thing. Of course, last year COVID messed everything up, but it has been a real positive. And then at Christmas time, this year we actually had fireworks at Christmas time because July 4th had gotten thrown out of whack. So a lot of good stuff happens down there, and it's accessible, like you say, beautiful parks. We've actually are in the process of planting some more pecan trees down there and trying to make sure we keep that orchard healthy and everything just available to the public. So something we invite everybody to come down, bring a picnic, let the kids play in the splash pad when it gets a little warmer, and just enjoy that, and let that be a good introduction to Diboll.
That's right. It's a beautiful area.
That's great. And it's right next to the golf course, Nature's Fine.
It backs up to the golf course, right? Golf course, another real asset that Diboll has. guys. Really a tremendous course for everybody that likes
course.
golf.
Yeah.
You know, I've never been a big golfer, but now I've got a freshman in high school, and she started golf.
Nice.
So
Good for
we've
her.
spent more time at the golf course lately than I ever had before. But really nice facility, and a lot of people enjoy that. And like I say, just right up against the parks, and so you kind of get, you know, some double benefit
That's
there.
right.
Yeah, it's a great little golf course. It's the course I ever played my first round of golf on. I remember my dad taking me out there when I was a kid, and the first hole at Diboll at Nature's Pines, if you've never been there, runs parallel to the driving range. And while they were playing, my cousin and I were running up and down the driving range, like, look at all these free golf balls. we can take all of these. And we didn't get to keep any of the golf balls, but it's an awesome little golf course there.
Is.
And a memorial library, right, in Diboll. You want to talk a little about that?
Yeah, great library. The library has been something that I think a lot of people in Angelina County have taken advantage of for a long time.
Absolutely.
And not to talk bad about any other library, but it really does stand out as far as the things they have available. Justin and the staff there do a really good job of trying to have a lot of community events and outreach, and just a fantastic library.
He has so many
And
great things during the summer for kids.
Yes,
It's a wonderful library. And then you've got the History Center, which is just right across the street. You know, it's hard to believe they have more than 1 million images on file. And it's something at the chamber, we use their images all the time.
Yeah.
I'm always calling going, Jonathan,
Absolutely.
I'm looking for this photo. And he's like, give me a few days. And all of a sudden my email inbox is just flooded with fantastic photos.
Right.
So.
Yeah, they do a good job. And there's so much stuff. Like I say, you've got all the images, you've got a lot of archival stuff to do research. And then there's just some really cool interviews and oral history that they've taken over the years. And so I'm the same way, that I'll hit them up and say, hey, we need this or that. Diboll Day a couple of years ago, we were looking for some background on somebody that we were honoring, and I mean, just no time they had it for us.
That's right.
So a really, really good asset again. And they're fixing to get a new addition there, a statue that's going to move over from the former corporate office.
Okay.
And so it's going to be another, just a real
Awesome.
part of Diboll history.
That's right.
And of course, they don't just focus on Diboll.
That's
It's
right.
it's all of this area, but Diboll's the best, of course. So
Absolutely.
That's the focus.
Well, they have helped me a lot over the years, especially when we're doing like, Business Hall of Fame, things like that. And I'm needing, because so many times the people over the years have been in the lumber industry, and they're my go-to to call.
Right.
So, yeah.
Great job.
Well, you've been, like you said, you were part of city council. You did all of that. Tell us about the Diboll business climate.
Well, Diboll is definitely open for business, and we're available and ready for anybody to come. And we've got some folks that are taking us up on that.
Good.
And so just recently, we've had several businesses that have moved to Diboll or opened in Diboll for the first time. Just this past weekend, we had the ribbon cutting for Pinnacle Nutrition and Fitness, which is a new 24-hour gym.
Nice.
And then they also focus on nutrition and other fitness type stuff. Of course, the former corporate office, Temple corporate office, is recently sold to Mark Hicks Group, and he's moved his business down there, and so that's a real positive to have them in town. And he's done wonderful things with the other projects, so we're looking forward to having them be part of Diboll. There's a law office that's in the process of moving. I don't know if they've finalized everything, so I won't say
We won't
which
say the
one.
name.
Okay.
We won't
But
push.
they should be there in just the next few weeks, and we're excited about having them. And then several others that are right outside the city or inside the city limits of Diboll,
Great.
and or have expanded. So we're really excited to have them. But we're like I say, open. We want businesses to come, and I think that it's a great opportunity. We've got a good workforce that's got a great work ethic and ready to go to work if somebody needs us. And the city wants to make it easy to do business. I mean, obviously, you're going to have rules and regulations anywhere, but the whole goal is to make it where business can be done. And so want to be transparent, want to make it simple to work through any processes. And so any business of any type we definitely encourage, check Diboll out. We've got real estate available, and we've got folks that are open and willing to work with you and ready to bring you on. And that's an area that I've got personal experience with, because I had my office in Lufkin for 15 years, and about 8 years ago moved to Diboll. Business has flourished and done really well in Diboll, and I think that there's some others that have a similar backgrounds, and so we're always happy to have business come check us out, and we'll do anything we can to make it work.
That's right.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Really good stuff. Can you tell us a little bit about what are your big goals for Diboll? Obviously, there's a lot of really great stuff happening there, and kind of what's on the horizon for you.
Well, you talk about big, and so the kind of the big picture type items, and this is what we talked about back during the campaign, that the whole point of city government is to take care of just a couple of big things. You've got public infrastructure like your water, your sewer, your streets, and then you got public safety, so police and fire, basically. And if you don't do those things, it really doesn't matter what else you do.
Absolutely right.
And if you do those things, it doesn't matter what else you do, because you've taken care of the things that are really important to people. And a lot of times, if you can take care of those, business and community and all can take care of a lot of the other items that are needed in a community. So those are going to be the focuses. And now a lot of that from a city level has got to be done through the budget process. And so, we're still several months out from the next budget round.
Right.
But those have got to be the priorities. And so that's where we'll be keeping our attention. It's easy in any organization, and especially any kind of government, it's easy to get distracted by all the stuff. And so I think that's something that my school background, we were successful at trying to stay out of those things and the weeds that you can get bogged down. And so that's the attitude we want to take at the city level, is just focus on those items. If it doesn't have something to do with public infrastructure, public safety, then it's going to be a little bit lower down the list. It's not that it's not a good thing, not that it's not important, but we've got to do these things and do them right. That's why we're there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we know, with you being new in office, there are definitely the first few infrastructure needs and plans that are on your list. What do you want to immediately start out with?
Well, we've got a lot of infrastructure in Diboll that's just old.
Yeah.
And I imagine most cities could probably say that, but Diboll definitely falls in that category. We've got some good things and some things that have been well maintained, and some things that have probably had a useful life of 20 years and 30 has been squeezed out of them, And so some people that work for the city have done a good job of trying to make those things last and serve the public, but they're just getting to the end of their useful life. So the goal is, of course, to kind of prioritize, figure out where are the most pressing needs and address those. Of course, you got to find the money, and that's always a challenge. You don't want to just be going and raising taxes willy-nilly or that kind of thing. So you've got to really focus and prioritize those items. And again, you want to make sure that if you're doing something, that you're doing it well and you're meeting those needs. So water and sewer definitely are going to be right at the top, and streets have to be prioritized. And so that's one of the things that we're hoping. We're looking at some stuff. The city has a plan, a 5 and 10 year plan. But there are some holes, as you would always have in any plan, and then of course sometimes, and this is kind of where I've landed here recently. There's some new opportunities that just come along that the plans couldn't anticipate, and so we have to be responsive to that. We have to look and see, hey, just because this wasn't on the plan doesn't mean it's not a good way to meet these needs. And so that's something we're working on right now, is a new avenue that hasn't been tried before. Hopefully it'll work out, but it'll just give us a way to address some of those concerns without maybe taking on new debt or having tax increases, and help us to go ahead and start meeting some of those needs. Like I say, just maybe thinking a little bit outside the box.
Yeah.
What has surprised you so far in your time as mayor, if anything? What's been a surprise to you?
I don't know that anything's really surprised me. You get in and you start dealing with things on a more hands-on level than what you had before. And so sometimes things become a little more apparent. But I don't know that anything's been a real surprise. It's just, sometimes you talk about stuff in campaigns or whatever, and as you get in there, you say, hey, yes, it's even more so that way or whatever. And so that's probably where it has been, is just that, I thought this was something that we need to deal with. Maybe it's something we need to deal with even quicker than we thought before. So there's just a lot of those kinds of things. Yeah. And that's just business and life and everything else.
Absolutely.
Comes with the job.
Right. That's right.
Yeah, great.
That's right. Well, we appreciate you coming today, and we appreciate you talking about Diboll and letting the listeners and the viewers know what's happening and what they can come and enjoy in Diboll. It's so important for all of us to work together and to come together as an East Texas community and as a county. And so we appreciate you coming on and telling the listeners about your first few months as mayor.
Yeah.
So.
Well, like I say, we're excited about Diboll. We love Diboll,
right.
and it's a great community that we want everybody to come join us, and think we have a lot to offer. And so we're always excited to talk about that.
That's right.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you.
Well, great. Well, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being on the podcast here. And we want to thank you all at home. Thank you for listening to the podcast and subscribing every week. We're just blown away at the support that this podcast has received. And we want to thank you so much for listening. If you'll do us a favor, if you'll subscribe to this podcast on whatever podcatcher you're currently listening on, or if you also go and review the podcast, that'll help us a lot as well. If you'd like to catch the video version of this podcast, it is available on the Facebook page for the Chamber, as well as the Chamber YouTube channel. Thank you, and we will see you next week.
Well, we're thrilled to have the mayor of Burke, John Thomas Jones. Mayor, thank you for being with us. We're so excited to be able to visit with mayors from all around Angelina County and to really be able to let our listeners know what's going on in your community. So why don't you start off by telling us about you, and did you grow up in Burke? Kind of give us your background history first.
Well, I didn't grow up in Burke, but as a small child, I rode the railroad train from Houston back to Tyler to Henderson, Texas. And I was born and raised in Jornaville, but I was born in Jacksonville, Texas. And I probably met my wife when I come through Burke, way back there in the early 30s. So she always went out and met the train and rode it into Lufkin. And years later, when I was going to college in Dallas, my dad was pastor at First Baptist Church there in Burke. And I came home to visit him and seen a girl walking down the street, which ended up being my wife. And she still is.
I love that. And you've been married 65 years?
Well, we're working on 65.
That's fantastic.
We haven't made that yet, but my grandfather and grandma were married 77 years, so I got a ways to go.
That's wonderful.
Wow. What's the secret to staying together that long?
Well, first thing, you need to know the Lord.
Okay.
He's the one that gives you extended time.
That's right.
And anything you do, you got to remember you're going to give account.
Right.
And that's to the Lord. Not to your public, but to the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
And because he died for everybody. All he asked us to do was to say, I'm sorry, forgive me, and save me.
Mm-hmm.
That's how simple it is. So if anybody don't make it to heaven, it's because you hadn't said, I'm sorry, and admitted that you were a sinner, which is very simple. And I'm so thankful that we have a country that's based on Judeo-Christian beliefs. All of our forefathers went to school to learn to read the Bible. And when I went to school, they read the Bible to us. We had prayer in school. We pledged allegiance to the flag. And most of the trouble we had was somebody maybe spitting or chewing gum in school.
Or sticking it under the table.
Yeah, so we didn't. And if we got out of line, the teacher warmed our sitting down place till we learned to obey the rules and regulations.
Right.
And then when you went home after they found out you had a whooping, you got another
You got
one.
another one. That's
And then
right.
when Grandpa and them found out about you, got another one. So we didn't have any trouble, behaving ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Well, tell us what you do other than being the mayor of Burke.
Well, I'm a great grandpa, and I've got a lot of kids and grandkids, and we live in Burke.
How did you come? How did you come to live in Burke?
Well, I met my wife Sadie there, Franklin. She was a Franklin, and she lived right in front of the Baptist church. And I seen her walking down the road, and I asked my dad, could I meet her? He said, "Son, she won't go with you because you smoke and chew."
Mm-hmm.
Back in those days, everybody smoked and chewed tobacco. And my grandfather grew tobacco. So it was a habit everybody had.
Right.
And so it was kind of unusual for a girl not to have anything to do with a man smoke, because most men and women smoked.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, boy, if that's what it takes, I've got to quit
I'll
smoking.
give it up.
Right.
So I went back to Dallas. I was going to Drones Business College to be a bookkeeper. And because one of my uncles, my dad's brother, was a bookkeeper, and he advised me to go, and that he would try to find me a job in Amarillo.
Okay.
So before the test was to be made for the bookkeeping, so I'd get my certificate, my grandmother had a heart attack in Rush County, and I came home, and of course I missed my test. I was going to have to wait another 6 months to do it. So I decided to come in and start going to college at State Teachers College at SFA. It wasn't a university then. And so while I was there, I kept trying to meet my future wife. And of course, she come to church at Burke there. And all the other girls was interested in me because I was this tall, skinny, black-headed boy. And I led the music there in the church for my dad. But the girl I was trying to get a date with, she kind of ignored me because she was working at the Lufkin Telephone Exchange, the old plug-in.
Yes, sir.
Right.
She was a night operator, and she'd have to look up the directory to be able to dial New York City or Chicago or whatever. And so I finally got a chance to meet her, and took about a year, but I managed to ask her.
Worth every day.
Yeah, it's worth every day. And but I never told her I smoked or chewed. I had quit.
You had to quit by then.
I had quit by that time. And after we were married, the strange thing happened. My mother came in and said, "Son, here's your pipe you left at the house." I turned three different colors of red because she looked at me like, boy, she probably thought I was smoking on the side.
On the side.
And so I said, no, I'd quit before I came down here. And she forgave me and when I told her the truth. And so I never have took up the habit again.
So did you become a bookkeeper?
No, I didn't, because I never got to take the test. I was going to SFA and studying to be an engineer.
Okay.
And of course, when we got married, we didn't know anything about how to keep from having children. We started having one. Seemed like every time you turn around, we had 3 boys and we had 2 girls. And of course, by that time, you was A1 in the draft, but they wouldn't take you if you had children. So I was A1, and a lot of people were joining the National Guard, and so they wouldn't have to go. But I was working at a place called T.L. Smith Company, it's in Lufkin here, And I just never did get drafted, I guess what you'd say. I got deferred because of being a family man.
Right.
And then I went to work for Temple Associates in Diboll, working under Arthur Temple's group there. And I helped build a fiberboard division and overseeing all that. I kept the books for him and I signed for all the millions of dollars worth of equipment coming in to make sure it was on the job site, and I recorded and made sure that Arthur Temple didn't get cheated. Because you order stuff, and if it don't come in, you're still paying for it.
That's right.
You need to be sure it's there. And so that's what I did. And I ended up, being as I was a draftman, I learned that in high school, and I learned typing in high school. So he moved me over to Temple Associates because he wanted me to be a draftman for him and also take care of watching the figures on any project that he had in the works. And I was there when they built the Twin Towers in Nacogdoches for the school over there. And he built the First Bank and Trust down here in town, and the Cargan School, and a few other, and the Lufkin Foundry Trailer Division that was moved out to Buck Creek. I drew the plans for that, but I didn't have an engineering seal, so another engineer would verify what I had drawn, and he would put the seal on it. So I got to draw all that. If you see the T-beams out there of concrete, that was a little thing that I was doodle-bugging around, came up with, and made a form to pour all that concrete out of those T-beams. And Arthur and all them, now you see them all over the world. Mm-hmm. And so the walls at that building out there are floating. They're not attached to anything. They're sitting on rubber. And as the building expands and contracts, the walls breathe. Mm-hmm. So it don't crack the walls. And so I thought that was kind of neat that it worked out. And I saved, I forgot how much money we saved in forming material, because I was also a welder when I come up out of high school with an uncle who was a pipeline welder. So I designed a set of forms that we could pour all those using the same forms by just moving a few baffles. And it worked out real good.
Wow,
And
those are great stories.
It was kind of neat to be there. And I was Arthur Temple's gopher, I called it. But when he was in the old commissary downtown Diboll, and when he needed anybody to bring a message back to him, he'd write a note, give it to me, and I'd take off across the railroad yard and the logging yard and go to the mill and hand him the note. And my job was to get the note and come right straight back to the commissary, which was a 2-story building on the old railroad at that time, green building, run upstairs, and if he was in a meeting, no matter how many people he was meeting with, governors, mayors, or whatever, I had to walk up behind him and hand him the note. We didn't have cell phones back in those days. And so if he didn't like what I gave him, he'd write another note. And back across the yard, I'd go. And it was kind of funny. Rain, sleet, or snow, I was running across that yard.
Those are great
and
stories.
So
Great
that's the reason he put me over at Temple Associates after the phones got a little better connected and what have you.
I love that.
And I enjoyed that. And years later, when the kids enough had inherited some money, I built the first water slide in Texas called the Oasis Waterway. And it was an in-ground water slide, and we had the Jerry Lewis Telethon twice there. And of course, it operated for about 8.5 years, and then the state of Texas changed the rules for insurance. Mm-hmm. We were using motel insurance so that the kids could land in the pool and be covered with insurance. But the state of Texas said you had to have entertainment insurance. Mm-hmm. So entertainment insurance is where you are responsible for the first $1 million claim.
Wow.
So we shut down. Diboll had to shut all their pools down and fill them in. Lufkin had to shut all their pools down and fill them in. That's all because the legislature didn't realize if you make it to where you be liable for $1 million, the city didn't want to be liable for $1 million, and Diboll didn't either. And so I couldn't be because I was on my own.
Sure.
And so we shut down. And a lot of kids lost. Now, if you're a multi-million corporation with lawyers, you can afford to, like Six Flags and stuff like that, and Water Worlds, you can afford to bear that kind of burden. And sometimes legislature don't always work to your favor.
Well, you've had a fantastic life.
Well, the history of Burke is kind of unique to me because,
Tell us about that.
well, it was a stage run from Jefferson, Texas to Galveston before there was a Houston. So it's about 1800 when the town was kind of originally established, and it was called Rhodes. Captain Rhodes was the one that run the stage stop. And the twin city was called Moscow. Mm-hmm. And Burke had a school and a cannery and a brick plant and Masonic Lodge and a few other things. But before they had the Masonic Lodge, they rode horseback from Burke all the way to Homer, which was a county seat at that time. And then when the railroad come through, they came through the ferry crossing for the stage run, and they come straight through Burke and went on into Nacogdoches. See, the Stone Fort was the other stage stop. Mm-hmm. And then you go on up there, and then Henderson was the next stage. Mount Enterprise, then Henderson, and then Longview, and then on up to Jefferson. So those were all stage runs.
And we're talking about stagecoaches.
Stagecoaches.
Right? Okay.
So we don't think about that, but when they got below Burke, they caught a ferry. Okay. Then they went on down to the Treasure River, and there was no need of going any further because that was considered swamp from there on down to Galveston. So they caught the paddle wheel and went on down to Galveston.
Isn't that amazing?
And
so what point did they become a city, Burke?
Burke was a little sawmill town. Mm-hmm. It had 2 cotton gins. All of where the airport is and all that area was cotton fields. Mm-hmm. And they had cotton gins, and they'd bale their cotton, and they'd carry them down and put them on barges to float down the river, and then eventually go on down to Galveston to be shipped that way. And then when the railroad started coming in, they started shipping everything by railroad. Mm-hmm. And that's just the way. Then when Homer realized that they didn't have a railroad station, Burke did, and Burke made the mistake, their city fathers decided they didn't want to have the noise of the railroad train backing up and whistling and switching the trains around. They said, why don't you go on up above Hoshow? There's a clear cut up there where Keltis sawmill is, and build that roundhouse up there, which is 10 miles away. And it won't disturb us. Burke at that time had over 3,000 people. And they were one of the cities that voted Angelina County dry.
Okay.
Groveton voted theirself wet. They shrunk. Perry Brothers and all that came from Groveton to Lufkin. Because when they laid out a town around the railroad center, they named it Lufkin. So people in Homer took all the courthouse records and burnt the courthouse down and moved to Lufkin.
That's right.
So it's kind of neat to understand. If Burke had allowed the roundhouse to be built in the edge of Burke,
it would be very different today.
Well, see, Burke's on a high plateau, a perfect place to build an airport. Burke voted years ago to change the state right-of-way, which was old 35, which was, we call it 59 now, that goes into Diboll. we turned it into a county road, so the funding from that could be used by the county commissioners to build the Angelina County Airport. So Burke's been instrumental in getting an airport in Angelina County.
Sure has.
Now, Burke is on a high plateau. Water runs north, south, east, and west out of Burke. We have no floodplain. When you go through Burke now, when you see where the new loop is coming around Diboll, you'll notice the high mountains and everything going around toward Diboll. It's coming back into around the airport there. So that's going to put Burke right on the easiest place to get to the airport.
That's right.
And then when they extend the road all around, which will come out on the other side of Lufkin, which will end up being somewhere around where we call, what's the name of that? Salvage place there.
Yes, sir.
That's where the road will eventually come through, and it'll bypass Lufkin. But it'll make the town grow. And Burke's already, we'll have an overpass. We've got a new road that's going to be brought into Burke by the state and tied into the old Highway 35 or the old Houston Highway. And the people in Burke will have access maintained by the state, thank the Lord, because I used to work for the state, so I held out for that and got that. And so far, the Lord's blessing us. And we don't have, we lost our filling stations, our grocery stores and everything when they came through the middle of Burke and bought everything up. That's about 30 years ago. And we managed to hang on. But we dropped down to almost 225 from 3,000.
Wow.
And now we've built back to 737. And kids and grandparents' property has been divided, and they built new homes in Burke. And some businesses have moved in. And Lufkin outlawed the fireworks in Lufkin, and we invited them to come build in Burke. So we're kind of...
You're just trading off.
So if what Lufkin don't want, we take in.
I love it.
And so...
well, it sounds like you've been in city government for a long time then.
Well, I've been off and on. I've been on the city council. I've been off the city council. My wife's been on it. My son's been on the city council. And our grandsons has been on the city council. And then I'm back on the city council. So it's just kind of back and forth. As one of them would move out and move on someplace else, we'd volunteer. And if nobody wanted to run, we'd run. But if somebody did want to run, they could run. We didn't, it was not something that you, there's no money in it. It's just something you do.
That's right.
We meet once a month, and it's always open. We have our own internet connection and everything. We have videos where we can cover everything. But we try to get grants and fix our roads for the public that qualify. If like Stringer Road was qualified because of poor people, and the road had a deep pitch to it, and the county was all of our roads in Burke are connecting roads. Old 35 is a connecting road from Diboll to Lufkin, which goes all the way into we say Walmart, and through Angelina College. And there again, Arthur Temple, which was in Diboll, gave the land for the Angelina College. When we started the Burke Water District back in the 60s, instead of having a water district just for the city of Burke, Fairview Acres wanted, a lot of the towns around there didn't have water districts. So we expanded it, and we took in full different places, and Angelina College didn't have anybody going to furnish them water. So we allowed them to tap onto our water, but as soon as the college got started, Lufkin stepped out and took them in and took the water district over. And so that's the way things work.
That's right.
And it is a federal water district, biggest one in the state. We had 5 wells, and then they voted for the Burke water people to allow Lufkin to take over their water district and operate it instead of hiring their own people. And so we voted to stay private as a federal water system, but the rest of the people wanted to allow Lufkin's engineers and people to maintain the water distribution system. So it left the federal water district turned over to be part of the city of Lufkin distribution system. So that kind of, it didn't change Burke. It just meant that city of Lufkin's furnishing water for Burke through a distribution system, and they have to maintain it for us. So it was a blessing for us.
I tell you what, Mayor, you are a wealth of knowledge. When I need something answered, I'm just going to call you and see what you know and pick your brain.
Well, it's not much to pick there.
No, it's been great. It's been great.
All I can say is I trust the Lord that this next couple of years don't go as bad as I think they're going. So I'll just have to wait and see.
That's right. That's right. Well, we appreciate you being on so much and
absolutely.
telling our listeners about Burke. You know, I think so many times we just are on a mission to get wherever we're going and we pass through. And I'm so glad to know more history about Burke.
Absolutely.
I was born and raised in Lufkin, but I didn't know any of that. So I've definitely learned something today, and I know our listeners have as well.
You're absolutely right. And we appreciate you coming on and sharing all this with us. And it's been a great lesson for us in the history out there of Burke. And we thank you so much for your time. And we want to thank all of our listeners out there. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this podcast every week. And thanks for joining us so much. And if you want to catch the video version of this podcast, you can watch that on the Chamber Facebook page as well as the Chamber YouTube channel. And we will see you next week. Thank you.